Hello and welcome. Hello, Paulina. Happy
Hi,
Monday.
teacher. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you today?
Great.
Awesome. Glad to hear it. We'll get started here in just a second as more folks stream in. This is Grammar and Context 2, May 18th, 2020. Today, I want to spend time with you guys in preparing for today's interview. Last week, we talked um, about setting up some questions for the interview. We got pushed back a little bit due to last week, and we didn't have class on Friday, and we didn't have class on Thursday either. So today, I want to spend time with you and give you enough time today to think about some of the questions that you want to post and that you want to include, I should say, with your interview. So as a reminder, today we're going to do an interview, and it's going to be a little bit different than the last interview that we did. I would like for you to try to interview two different people about the topic of COVID, right? So it's been in the news a lot. We've been talking a lot about it, I'm assuming, and with our family and friends. So I want you to think about two people that you have had prior conversations with in terms of what they think about COVID, what they believe to be true about COVID, the current situation. It could be related to work, could be related to school, could be related to home life. Basically, any topics, though, that relate in some way with COVID-19. So when you're thinking about your questions, okay, another aspect of the interview that's going to be different from our last interview is that we need to create all of the questions that we want to ask in this, what's called a structured interview. A structured interview is one that includes all of the questions that you're going to ask the particular person. So remember that we need two different people to interview. So we should ask exactly the same number of questions. We should ask, in fact, the same questions to each person, and we should also follow the same order that we ask each of the questions. Right? So today I want to give you some time to move some of the questions. I'm assuming most of you have, or hopefully all of you have, the questions that you want to ask. We need about 10 to 20 questions, all right, for this structured interview, between 10 and 20. And the types of questions that we should ask should be content questions. I'm going to type this into the chat if you have the chat open. Content questions. What are content questions? Well, content questions are going to be open questions. They're going to be questions that begin with how, why, when, where, maybe with whom. Okay, these are content questions. They're open questions. These are not yes, no questions. Okay, they are not yes, no questions. And try to avoid yes, no questions and then why. I saw a lot of two-part questions. Okay, we should have no two-part questions. They all should just be individual content questions that are open. Why is this important? Why not yes or no questions? Why not questions that begin with which, what, and how long, etc.? Okay, why not? Why not include questions that begin with which, what, how long? Because these are closed questions. We're going to get very short responses. If you ask a yes or no question, well, what answer are you likely to get? Yes or no. But we want to have longer answers. We want more descriptive answers. We want really good, hopefully long answers to each of the questions. Why? Because we want to compare at the end of all of this tomorrow when you come to class with your answers. right? You're going to have answers to your questions, and hopefully those answers are a little bit longer than a simple yes or no, right? So this is the reason why we want to try to have content questions that are open so that you have more information to compare and contrast when you look at the responses from both of these interviewees. All right, so let me show you here. I'm going to share my screen. And let's go to, in fact, let's go to we're going to go to Grammar and Context 2 in Microsoft Teams. And we're going to go to Files. Hopefully you can see my screen here. So I can move this out of the way. So we are in week 13. And we're going to go to a file here. Today we're going to all work in a shared Word document. Now, you guys have the advantage of actually looking at some of the questions from Prope A. And I would encourage you to do that. In fact, the reason why we're sharing this document is so that you can compare what you have versus what your classmates have. All right, so here in this document, we're going to continue editing this document all the way to the bottom. And we're going to add our list of questions. In fact, I'm going to edit this document and add Prope B at the very bottom. And give it a second here to open up. And let's scroll down all the way to the bottom. If you want to go ahead and open up this document yourself, this is where we're going to work today. Hopefully you can continue looking at my screen for a few more minutes before you get into your own questions so that I can clarify some of the question types that I'm looking for this structured interview. All right, so we're going to have here Prope B. And we're going to change this to a level 2 heading. And here's where you can begin adding your name. Again, so you can add your name here as a heading. Just your first name is fine. And then below your name, you can begin numbering your 10 to 20 open questions, content questions that we can use for our structured interview that we want to conduct before our next class. All right, so remember, we want open questions. All right, so one of the things I want you to think about is when you ask open questions, this doesn't necessarily mean that they're general questions. I would try to be more specific. I saw this morning some learners who were asking really good questions, really good content and open questions, but they were general. And then just below that question, they would ask more specific questions that fell under the more general question. So what I would do, instead of just the general question, I would stick to very specific open content questions. All right, so let me give you an example. Let's say one of your questions is, how is the coronavirus spread? All right, so that's what would be a more specific question to that, right? How did the coronavirus spread in the United States? How did the coronavirus spread in Mexico? How did the coronavirus spread in China? Or how did the government react to the spreading of the coronavirus? And then you could mention different countries. Instead of just asking a very general question that could apply to any country, how did the coronavirus spread, or how did the government, or how did the governments, plural, react to the coronavirus, where you could get all kinds of different responses. My point here is try to ask more specific questions. And if you're curious about the different governments and how they reacted and how this person views those differences, then ask very specific questions. You can repeat almost the same question, but a different, in this case, a different country. All right, as an example. So try to be specific, but you want open content questions. All right, open or yes, no questions we want to try to avoid. I think for example, if you say this would be a yes or no question, right? Any questions that begin with are, the verb to be, or questions that begin with the auxiliary do, right? Did anyone in your family get the coronavirus, right? For example, well, that's a yes or no question. So try to think about good topics related to COVID. And in the instructions in this page, in this document, I included some links here. I have two links, one to COVID-19. This is just a Wikipedia entry. It's a page. And certainly you can check out any web page that you want that's reliable, that relates to COVID-19. You don't have to use Wikipedia, but this is might be a good place to start. So feel free to review certain topics or aspects of COVID-19 to help think about specific questions that you had. That's one thing. And the second, make sure that you consider your prior conversations with this person or these two individuals. Try to create questions that build on information that you already know about their perspective and their knowledge and understanding of COVID-19. It's very important not to think of this as a quiz for them, that you don't post questions so that they feel like, well, you're just trying to figure out how much I know or how much I don't know. All right. So be careful also, based on your prior knowledge, based on what you know with this person or about this person, make sure that your questions are based on what they already know. All right. So again, what you want to do is compare and contrast their responses, but it's not about trying to see who knows more about Corona. No, we just want to be able to compare and contrast. And if you know, maybe you have two people in your family that have really opposing views, right? Totally different views about COVID-19. Maybe these are two candidates, two people that you might want to interview so that you can find out exactly how their responses differ. All right, so today what I'd like to do is give you time for the rest of the class to list out your questions. And as I did this morning, I'll do with you guys, I'll go in and I'll leave comments. And as I leave comments and you make the changes to your questions, I would ask that you then go ahead and remove the comments as you're making changes to your text. All right, so are there any questions about what we're doing today?
Ben, will you be like leaving the comments during this session?
Yes, I will. I'll leave comments as you're uploading your questions.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and mute my mic. I'm going to continue looking, and basically as you're uploading your information, uploading your questions, I'll be leaving comments, and I also may make additional comments as I did this morning, make additional comments as I see them, and as I feel like maybe we can address some of the issues to the whole group. Okay, so we'll combine both some of my feedback to the whole group as well as in the documents. But feel free to unmute your mic and jump in at any time and ask questions, or if you want me to look at something specific, feel free to jump right in.
Ben, I have a question about Aula Virtual.
Yeah, go ahead, Wendy.
Do you remember that we wrote our questions in the wiki, right?
Right, that's right. Mm-hmm.
And under or below the wiki, there was another like space for like a submission, and it was called something like about the questions. But I remember that you just said that we had to write our questions in the wiki. I wasn't sure if I had to write them in that part of the submission too. I I left it like as it was. I didn't do any changes there.
Okay, so are you referring to an assignment or the individual wiki that relate to the questions that we're talking about for this interview?
No, like the assignment.
Okay, so the assignment, the direct and indirect feedback, as far as your assignment goes, you were fine. I found what I was looking for, so I don't think there was a problem with the direct and indirect assignment from last week. Does that answer your question?
Kinda. I mean, I just wrote my questions in the wiki, but below the wiki there was like another section, and it was called, I guess, direct and indirect questions. So like the same topic as the wiki. So, but I didn't do or submit anything there.
Okay, and are these questions related to your first interview, or are those questions related to this interview that we're going to do today?
This interview.
All right, so if you guys have questions, all right, hopefully you've been able to develop your 10 to 20 questions before today's class. And if so, they're probably in your individual wiki that we started last week. So I would start by just copying and pasting those questions into this Word document. As you continue making changes and you're adding questions, when we finish today, you can copy and paste those questions back into your wiki from last week. Now, in the wiki from last week, you have your questions, right? And then you probably have another section that relates to maybe the date of the interview, the people that you're going to interview. You might have information in that section. What's the purpose of your interview? All right. And so that information, I'm not asking for right now. All I want in this Word document are the questions. But that information is designed to help you think about what kind of information you want to ask and include in your interview. But you don't have to do anything with that right now. Just make sure that it's in your wiki, and it should appear above the questions that you're going to have. Okay, but there are no assignments yet that relate to this activity that we're doing today and the activity that we did last week, creating these questions in your individual wiki. Does that answer your question, Wendy?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Thank
All right.
you.
You're welcome. So copying, pasting your questions over. Also, make sure that the text is Calibri and font size 11. Okay, that should be the default for your As you are listening all of your questions, one of the last things you'll do too is order or sort the questions, which is the best order in order to present your 10 to 20 questions. Okay, so also keep that in mind. Remember, guys, avoid yes, no questions. Avoid two-part questions. Two-part questions is like asking one question and then asking another. All right, so avoid two-part questions, avoid yes or no questions, avoid questions that begin with what, which, how long. All right, what, which, and how long. These questions are considered more closed types of questions. We want open questions so that hopefully we get a longer response. We get more information. That's the intention, right? Each question we want to get really good good answers, good descriptive answers. And again, try to be more specific, right? Try to be specific in your questions when you ask how and why and when types of questions. Okay, so I'm seeing a lot of what questions. I'm seeing a few yes or no questions, right? And we want to try to avoid yes no questions. We want to try to avoid questions that begin with which, what, how long. Okay, questions that begin with these words or phrases are considered more closed questions. We want to offer more open questions and try to keep that in mind, and also avoid two-part questions, right? If you have a when question and then later you want to ask a why question, separate those two into two separate questions. Separate those into different questions. Okay.
Ben,
Yes.
what if we ask a yes no question, but then we ask why? Is that correct or not?
I would just ask the why question. Okay. Because in the why question, you're going to get the answer to a yes or no. Right now, you know this person, right? I'm assuming that you know this person. I'm also assuming that you probably have spoken with the person or you've heard the person speak about COVID to a certain degree. So my guess is that you probably already know the answer to the yes or no question. And if you don't, that's fine too. But I would just pose the why question. And the worst thing that could happen is they could say, well, I don't either have a comment or, and they're going to basically not give you much of an answer. But again, I'm going to assume that you're going to rely on your prior knowledge about this person and his or her perspective and knowledge and understanding about COVID-19. So again, rely on that information. These aren't just questions that you would ask a stranger. You should know a little bit about the person, hopefully, before asking the questions. All righty. Pay close attention, guys, also to the pronouns that you're going to use. My suggestion would be to try to avoid the following pronouns: demonstrative adjectives, demonstrative pronouns, and the subject pronoun it. Now, what can you do? What can you, say instead of using those pronouns? Tell us what it is. Tell us what it is, right? Tell us what this situation is. Tell us what this is. Okay, even if you think, well, it's obvious, right? Because you maybe the prior question, you've already been talking about it. That's okay. I would rather you repeat terms, repeat ideas from one question to the next in order for each question to be really clear all by itself. Remember, guys, that we're eventually going to be talking about facts versus opinions when we get the replies from our interviewees. But avoid thinking in terms of opinions and facts when you ask your questions. For example, I would not have questions like, "What is your opinion about COVID-19?" Because essentially all the questions are about their opinion or what they know about COVID-19. So that would be an example of a question that I feel is a little bit too general. think about questions that are more specific in nature. All right. Again, I think it helps if you go to a document like the Wikipedia page that's titled Coronavirus Disease 2019. You might get some good ideas about more specific types of questions. For example, vaccines. You can have questions related to vaccines. You could have questions about medications, maybe even types of managements, how they manage diseases or conditions, right? Maybe some questions related to cause, symptoms, right? I'm just getting this information from this page, right? And I could easily come up with 2 or 3 questions related to probably 4 or 5 of these categories. Research. And this is just one page. There are many, many pages online that can give you some ideas about specific questions that you could ask when doing your interview. So again, we want open questions, but we want specific questions. We want questions that are open, not closed, and that are not yes or no questions, so that we get hopefully a more descriptive response. We want to get more information, or at least the most information that we can from our interviewees. A question like, what is COVID-19? I feel is too general. All right. So again, go to your readings if you need to. Go to your prior experiences and conversations. You've probably had conversations with this person before about COVID-19. So base some of your questions specifically on those prior conversations, right? It could be something that a question or a conversation you had last night that was very specific, right? And be specific. I would rather I don't think you can be really too specific unless the question is so specific, there's just a very, very short answer. All right. But I think in most of our cases, we can be more specific instead of being too general. If anyone's having some questions about how to convert some of the questions, take a look at the notes section at the bottom of this page. I have some examples. So if you look at the first example, what is the real origin of COVID-19? All right. You might ask a how question instead. How did COVID-19 begin? Right? You might even ask, where did it begin? But if you ask where it began, right, you're still limiting yourself to one location. How did it begin? So the person could talk about where it happened and then more specifically, how did it happen? How questions are really good types of questions, right? Why questions are really good. Okay, when you ask who or what, even sometimes where, even though um, that may generate a very limited answer. It just depends on what the person knows about the situation or about the context of the question. Take a look at the second question. This is an example of converting a yes/no question to a content question. So here you can replace the yes/no question. Have you seen something positive during the situation? Instead of the situation, we could also state what situation we're referring to. Now, I know we're referring to COVID-19, but are we referring to the situation here in Mexico, in Aguascalientes, in the United States, in China, in Spain, in Europe? All right, where exactly, what kind of situation are we talking about? You can replace this yes, no question with, how has the Mexican government responded to COVID-19? And then you can ask even this month, this week. You might even ask questions about how's the government here in Mexico handled COVID-19 this month versus the prior month. And then that way you might even generate a more detailed response. Okay, so these are two examples of changing from a closed question, in one case a yes/no question, to a more open type of question. In both examples here, these happen to be how questions, but they don't all have to be how questions. They can be why types of questions. All right, guys, I think we'll finish up there. I would take another look at the instructions here at the top of the document. Make sure that you have 10 to 20 questions. Go ahead and organize the questions in the best order that you want to ask your interviewees. Make sure that you include two people in your interview, and make sure that you ask not only the same questions, but the same order for each of your interviewees. If you need to, take a look at any of the comments that I've left any of your classmates, as well as any comments that I left to your questions. Please remove the comments once you have changed the text. And if you need to see some examples, you may refer to the notes section at the bottom of the page, where I have a few examples of converting both from closed questions to open questions. One's a yes/no question, the other's a what type of question. All right, so for the next class, you're going to have either an opportunity to do your interview today, later this afternoon, or you might do it in the morning, but try to have your both interviews done by next class so that we can begin looking at the responses, and we'll do some activities related to those responses tomorrow in class. Any questions, guys, regarding today's activity? Well, if there are more questions, then we'll see everybody tomorrow. Enjoy the rest of your day. And tomorrow we'll look at your responses. I would also record your interview like we did the first interview, so that you have easy access to their responses. Okay. All right, guys. We'll see you tomorrow.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.